Every plant on this list has the same problem. And it is not that the plant is ugly, difficult to find, or expensive. The problem is that for every one of these popular, widely sold perennials, there is a genuinely better alternative sitting quietly on a different shelf at the same garden center. One that delivers the same visual result, the same bloom color, the same garden function, without the invasive spread, the structural damage, or the years of maintenance that the popular choice demands. This video is built differently than most plant comparison content. We are not asking whether a plant is good or bad in isolation. We are asking a more useful question for the specific job you want this plant to do in your garden. The color, the height, the ground coverage, the screening, the fragrance. Is there something else available right now at the same price point that does that job better and asks less of you in return? 12 times in this video, the answer is yes. And by the end, you'll have a complete substitution list you can take directly to a garden center this season. Alternative number 4 solves a structural damage problem that costs homeowners thousands of dollars in repairs every year, with a replacement that delivers the identical visual effect. Alternative number 8 addresses one of the most commonly repeated gardening myths in America: a plant blamed for something it does not actually cause, and gives you the genuinely better option besides. And the final alternative on this list replaces the single most regretted perennial in American gardening with something that delivers the same fragrance and the same shade performance without any of the consequences that plant is famous for. Drop your US state in the comments before we start, because plant performance and invasive status both vary by region, and we will be referencing that throughout. And if Garden Senior Living is not already part of your week, subscribe before this video ends. The better alternative every single week for every problem plant still being sold at full price. Let's get into it. Alternative 1, trumpet vine to coral honeysuckle. The popular choice, trumpet vine, Campsis radicans. Enormous orange-red trumpet flowers, genuinely powerful hummingbird draw. Sold at garden centers from coast to coast every spring for around $12. The problem most buyers don't learn until year 3 or 4. Trumpet vine spreads aggressively by underground runners that travel into lawns, through driveway cracks and under fences into neighboring yards, while aerial roots attach to house siding with enough grip to pull paint off when removed. Professional removal commonly runs between $500 and $2,000. The better alternative, native coral honeysuckle, Lonicera sempervirens. The flowers are arguably more striking, a deeper, richer red-orange, and the hummingbird response is, if anything, stronger. It blooms from spring through the first hard frost across zones 4 through 9, twines beautifully on any trellis, and stays exactly where you plant it. The same dramatic vine experience at a comparable price, with none of the multi-year cleanup bill waiting at the other end. Zones 4 through 9 for both plants. If a flowering vine is on your list this season, this is the single highest value substitution on the entire video. Alternative 2, English ivy to native pachysandra and Virginia creeper. The popular choice, English ivy hedera helix. Sold as the universal solution for difficult shaded slopes and problem areas where nothing else establishes. Inexpensive, widely available, and genuinely effective at covering ground in its first season. The problem, English ivy climbs. When it reaches a tree, it blocks sunlight from the canopy and adds enough physical weight over years to make mature trees measurably more vulnerable to storm damage. Trees that took 50 or 60 years to grow have been lost to this mechanism across the country. It is also listed as invasive in 18 states. The alternative depends on the job. For flat shade ground coverage, native pachysandra delivers the identical dense evergreen carpet with real ecological value and zero tree risk. For climbing surfaces, Virginia creeper climbs beautifully with spectacular red fall color, without the canopy-smothering behavior that makes English ivy dangerous to the trees it climbs. Both alternatives are native to most of the eastern United States and increasingly available at mainstream garden centers, not just specialty native plant nurseries. Same ground coverage job, same climbing job, none of the tree risk. Alternative 3. Purple loosestrife to native blazing star. The popular choice where it can still be found. Purple loosestrife, Lythrum salicaria. Tall, dense purple flower spikes from midsummer through early fall, marketed historically as a butterfly magnet and low-maintenance perennial. Both claims technically true. The problem is a number worth repeating. One mature plant produces up to 2.7 million seeds in a single year, traveling on wind, water, and animal fur far beyond the original planting. Purple loosestrife has documented destroying thousands of acres of American wetland habitat and is restricted or listed as noxious in more than 24 states. The alternative, native blazing star, Liatris spicata. The same tall purple spike and powerful butterfly attraction, including critical monarch migration support, in a genuinely well-behaved plant native across most of the eastern United States. If purple loosestrife is sold anywhere near you, it likely should not be. But if you see a loosestrife look perennial on a tag, check the genus before buying, because Liatris delivers the identical visual with none of the seed dispersal catastrophe. Alternative 4. Asian Wisteria to American Wisteria. This is the alternative that solves a structural damage problem that costs homeowners thousands of dollars in repairs every year. The popular choice, Chinese wisteria or Japanese wisteria, cascading purple flower clusters, a fragrance that carries across an entire property, sold every spring as the romantic flowering vine for pergolas, arbors, and fences. The first 5 to 7 years deliver everything the catalog promises. The problem arrives after that good behavior period ends. The woody vines thicken to several inches in diameter, and the weight shifts from ornamental to genuinely structural, capable of pulling down pergolas, collapsing arbors, and strangling trees beyond recovery. That multi-year delay before damage becomes obvious is exactly what makes this plant so costly. By then, the structure investment is already significant. The alternative, American Wisteria or Kentucky Wisteria. Identical cascading blooms, identical fragrance, identical heirloom character, in a vine that behaves predictably across zones 3 through 9 and never consumes its support structure. Blue Moon Kentucky Wisteria blooms earlier than its Asian counterparts and is now widely available. If a wisteria is going on a pergola or arbor this season, this single substitution could be the difference between decades of enjoyment and a demolition project down the road. Alternative 5. Mint in open ground to mint in containers. This alternative is slightly different from the others on this list because the better choice is not a different plant. It's a different placement for the exact same plant. The popular choice, any mint variety, planted directly into an open garden bed, spearmint, peppermint, chocolate mint, lemon mint. All genuinely useful, fragrant, low-maintenance herbs that perform exactly as advertised in their first season. The problem? Mint spreads through underground stolons that move through every neighboring root zone, breaking apart during removal and regenerating from every fragment. What starts as a tidy herb addition becomes, within 2 to 3 years, a labor-intensive removal project requiring replanting everything mint has grown through. The better alternative? The identical plant in a container with drainage holes, placed on a hard surface rather than directly on soil. Full fragrance. Complete culinary use. Zero invasive behavior. This costs nothing extra and prevents the entire problem permanently. Every plant in the mint family, bee balm, lemon balm, catnip, motherwort, shares this same spreading tendency to varying degrees. And the container solution applies to every one of them. If mint is already on this season's planting list, the only change required is which container it goes into, not whether to grow it at all. Alternative 6. Yellow flag iris to blue flag iris. The popular choice? Yellow flag iris, Iris pseudochorus. Tall, elegant yellow flowers above clean, upright foliage, sold consistently as the definitive plant for pond edges and wet problem areas. The problem is, specific to how it spreads, its seeds float. Moving water carries them into natural waterways and wetlands entirely beyond the gardener's control, with no possibility of recall. Yellow flag iris is prohibited in Oregon, Washington, Wisconsin, and Vermont, with more states reviewing its status. The alternative? Native blue flag iris, Iris versicolor. Identical elegant form in blue-violet, genuinely well-behaved at pond edges, across zones 3 through 9, and actively supporting native pollinators rather than displacing them downstream. Before buying any plant specifically for pond or water garden placement, this is worth remembering as a category, not just a single substitution. Search the plant name, your state, and the word invasive before it goes in the cart. Many of the most destructive water garden plants sold freely in one state are prohibited 2 states over. 6 alternatives in, and notice what every single one has in common. The better choice was not more expensive, harder to find, or less visually impressive. In every case so far, the alternative delivers the same or better visual result for comparable money. Available at most of the same garden centers, selling the problem plant right next to it. That is the entire premise of this video, and it's the kind of practical, side-by-side comparison Garden Senior Living publishes every single week. If this list is changing what goes in your cart this season, the subscribe button is the decision worth making right now. Drop your state in the comments. Invasive status and ideal growing zones vary, and that regional detail matters for several of the remaining alternatives. Alternative 7. Japanese knotweed to native river oats. The popular choice, historically, and in some regions still currently, Japanese knotweed, Fallopian japonica. Bamboo-like architectural stems, attractive heart-shaped leaves, creamy, late-summer flower clusters, sold as a fast, effective ornamental screening solution. The problem is the most severe structural consequence on this entire list. The underground rhizome network has been documented pushing through poured concrete basement floors and foundation walls across multiple states, confirmed by structural engineers. Professional removal costs $5,000 to $20,000, the highest of any plant discussed on this channel, and rhizomes routinely cross property lines, creating litigation between neighbors. The alternative? Native river oats, Chasmanthium latifolium. Comparable height and screening presence, graceful seed heads providing winter interest, and a plant that stays exactly where planted, actively supporting native wildlife rather than threatening foundations. If Japanese knotweed is currently growing anywhere on a property or a neighboring one, the priority is a professional assessment before any removal attempt. The alternative recommendation here is for what to plant instead, once the existing knotweed situation has been properly addressed. Alternative 8, goldenrod, unnamed aggressive strain, to named compact goldenrod cultivars. This is the alternative that addresses one of the most commonly repeated gardening myths in America. A plant blamed for something it does not actually cause. Goldenrod does not cause hay fever. That belief has circulated for decades and is simply incorrect. Hay fever in late summer and fall is caused by ragweed, a wind-pollinated plant that blooms at the same time as goldenrod and gets the blame because the two species are easily confused at a glance. Goldenrod pollen is heavy, sticky, and insect-carried. It does not become airborne and cannot trigger the allergic reactions ragweed causes. The actual problem is selection, not allergies. Common goldenrod, sold unnamed in bulk, spreads aggressively by rhizome through average soil, infiltrating neighboring root zones within 2 to 3 years. The better alternative is a smarter selection within the same species, named compact cultivars bred for garden use. Fireworks goldenrod produces the same dramatic late-season bloom, the same monarch migration fuel stop, the same songbird seed source, in a plant that stays 2 to 3 feet wide rather than colonizing the border. Little Lemon and Golden Baby are similarly compact. If goldenrod is on the list this fall specifically for its genuine ecological value, buy the named cultivar. Walk past unnamed goldenrod sold loose from a bucket. Alternative 9. Delphinium and owl. Lupine in hot, humid climates. Baptisia and Salvia nemorosa. This alternative is regional rather than universal, and it's worth understanding both plants together because gardeners frequently fall for both at once, in the same cottage garden fantasy, in climates where neither one genuinely thrives. The popular choice? Delphinium and lupine, both producing spectacular tall flower spikes in blues, purples, and pinks that photograph beautifully in cottage garden and English border content circulating constantly online. Both plants perform at their absolute best in cool summer climates, the Pacific Northwest, New England, similar mild regions. The problem for most American gardeners, both plants struggle significantly in hot, humid summers. Delphinium attracts powdery mildew and slugs and frequently behaves as short-lived rather than the long-term investment the tag implies. Lupine resists transplanting due to a deep taproot and attracts aphids persistently. Gardeners across the South, Mid-Atlantic, and Midwest are commonly disappointed within 2 to 3 years. The alternative for most of the country, Baptisia delivers a comparable tall blue-purple spire and cottage garden presence, but persists 25 to 30 years across far more American climates, fixes soil nitrogen as a bonus, and is highly drought and heat tolerant. Salvia nemorosa varieties deliver the same saturated blue-violet color with 2 bloom cycles per season and far greater reliability across zones 4 through 9. If you specifically garden in the Pacific Northwest or New England, delphinium and lupine may genuinely be worth growing. For most of the rest of the country, these 2 alternatives deliver more of the look you actually want. Alternative 10. Bearded iris to Siberian iris. The popular choice? Bearded iris. Spectacular, layered, ruffled flowers in an extraordinary color range, blooming for 2 to 3 weeks in late spring and commanding more attention per square foot than almost any other perennial during that window. The problem is everything outside that window. Bearded iris foliage is unremarkable green for the remaining 10 to 11 months. The plant requires division every 3 to 4 years, monitoring for iris borers, and a counterintuitively shallow planting depth that, if gotten wrong, produces vigorous foliage and no flowers at all. The alternative? Siberian iris. A more refined, slightly less showy flower, but the plant is dramatically easier to keep thriving. No shallow planting depth requirement, far less division dependency, and fine, upright, grass-like foliage that remains attractive through the entire season rather than going floppy after bloom. It also tolerates damp soil, where bearded iris would struggle with rot. For gardeners specifically attached to the ruffled, dramatic bearded iris flower form and willing to manage its requirements, that remains a legitimate choice. For gardeners who want the iris aesthetic with dramatically less ongoing effort, Siberian iris is the better use of the same bed space. Alternative 11. Oriental poppy to peony. The popular choice? Oriental poppy. Enormous, crepe paper textured blooms in scarlet, orange, and salmon, often with a dramatic black center. Genuinely one of the most photographed perennials in American gardening for the 10 to 14 days it's in bloom. The problem is, the other 11 and a half months after flowering, Oriental poppy foliage collapses into a yellowing mess and disappears completely by midsummer, leaving a bare gap from July through the following spring. The alternative, Peony. Comparable dramatic flower scale and rich color in late spring, but peony foliage, say, remains full and structurally present through the entire season, providing a clean backdrop for everything blooming around it. And unlike oriental poppy, an established peony improves for decades, frequently 50 years or more, rather than requiring the garden to be planned around its disappearing act every year. The one honest trade-off: peonies require patience in their first 2 to 3 years, while the root system establishes, producing modest bloom before reaching full production. That patience is the entire cost of an alternative that then performs for the rest of a gardening lifetime. Alternative 12. Lily of the Valley to sweet woodruff. The final alternative on this list replaces the single most regretted perennial in American gardening with something that delivers the same fragrance and the same shade performance without any of the consequences that plant is famous for. The popular choice, Lily of the Valley, Convallaria majalis, 6-inch stems of intensely fragrant white bells in spring, genuine shade tolerance, thriving in difficult root-filled soil under mature trees where almost nothing else survives. The appeal is completely sincere, and the plant performs exactly as described for its first several seasons. The problem is twofold and has appeared on more regret lists than almost any other perennial on this channel. The rhizome system is thin, white, and essentially unbreakable, expanding for 10, 15, 20 years, crossing under hardscape into neighboring yards, with every removal attempt regenerating from any fragment left behind. And every part of the plant contains cardiac glycosides, toxic to children and pets, a consideration most gardeners learn about only after it has already spread. The alternative, sweet woodruff, Galium odoratum, genuinely fragrant, historically used to scent linens and flavor May wine, performing comparably in dry shade under mature trees, with a far more containable habit and no toxicity concern. The shade job gets done. The fragrance job gets done. None of the decades-long expansion, none of the safety risk. If fragrant spring shade coverage is the goal this season, this is the single substitution most worth making on the entire list. The complete substitution list, 12 problem plants, 12 better alternatives. Same job, same conditions, less regret, trumpet vine to coral honeysuckle, English ivy to native pachysandra, ground cover, or Virginia creeper, climbing, purple loosestrife to blazing star, Asian wisteria to American, or Kentucky wisteria, mint in open ground to mint in containers, yellow flag iris to blue flag iris, Japanese knotweed to native river oats, unnamed aggressive goldenrod to named compact goldenrod cultivars like fireworks, delphinium and lupine, hot climates, to Baptisia and salvia nemorosa, bearded iris to Siberian iris, oriental poppy to peony, lily of the valley to sweet woodruff. Every alternative on this list does the same essential job as the plant it's replacing. The same color, the same height, the same ground coverage, the same fragrance, which is exactly the point. This was never a video about giving up on a particular look or function in your garden. It was about getting that same look and function from a plant that won't cost you a removal bill, a damaged structure, or years of disappointing maintenance down the road. The best time to make this substitution is before the original plant goes in the ground, not after 3 years of watching it become a problem. Bring this list to a garden center this season. Ask specifically for the named alternative, and in most cases you'll find it sitting on a nearby shelf at a comparable price. Sold quietly next to the popular choice that gets all the catalog attention. Which of these 12 substitutions are you making this season? Drop the number in the comments. And if you've already made one of these swaps yourself, tell everyone watching how the alternative performed compared to the plant it replaced. That real comparison is worth more than anything said from this side of a camera. If this list helps even one person walk past the wrong plant and toward the better one, the like button is how that information reaches them before the purchase rather than after. Garden Senior. Living publishes a new video every single week, the better alternative every time. Subscribe so the next one finds you. See you then. Garden Senior Living, the better alternative every week.